There are a couple of different ways to animate a bouncing ball in Blender. This demo, I'm going to use a sphere and a bone, an armature bone. It works differently than other softwares like Maya, where you can use, you can parent and group objects and they're given new nodes and pivot points. The scene collection, which is similar to the outliner in Maya, doesn't work the same way. So I'm going to delete my cube. I'm going to delete my light. I want to add a mesh UV sphere. And we'll look at this in the right view. And I want to translate it in Z. Give it smooth shading. And since I want to be able to see the rotation, I can put a material on that, but I'll need to be in material preview mode. So let's also make sure that we're rendering with the Eevee renderer, and our frame rate is 30 frames a second, and we'll go to 120 frames for a frame range. We can change that, but I'll start with that. So to put a material on this object, I can go into the shading workspace, click on new material, and then add a textured checker texture. And as soon as I bring the color into the base color, it will update on my object. It's not connected to the UVs, so the checker doesn't look exactly dimensional or square or rectangle. So I'm going to add an input, a texture coordinate node, and we'll bring that into the UV vector. Now if I look from the top view, I can see that there's a pattern here connected to the UVs, but the scaling comes in and it's not always an even scaling. So if it's an even number, if it's even scaling. If it's an odd number, it's odd. It's not, it won't look straight. So we'll keep it at an even number in scaling. We'll go in and change the color so we can see it a little better. And now I'll save this. And go back to my layout mode. So to configure this so I can now move it around and keyframe it, I'm going to add in an armature. So add armature, and it's brought it in. I just can't see it because the shading is covering the object. So I'm going to go into my object preview, go down to viewport display, and viewport display show in front. So now I can see this armature object. And we'll name this ball control. We'll name the sphere ball. I'll go back and select the ball control, go into edit mode, and I want to increase the length so it goes the length of the ball. I don't want to do that by scaling. I want to keep my scale units the same because I'll need those scale units to be accurate and consistent when I animate. So now I want to connect the ball to the armature so it follows. So I'll select the ball and shift pick the ball control and go into the object menu and choose parent with automatic weights. Now when I move this ball around, this armature around, the ball will follow. So wherever I move this to, the ball will follow. And I can scale this. I can add a maintain volume scaling constraint on here. So let's try this, and we'll make it the Z factor. So now when it scales up in Z, we'll get a little squash and stretch happening. Let's see if that holds up when I animate it. Otherwise, I can remove it. So we'll save scene. And now I'm going to go into the animation workspace. So we'll go back to our X view. And I don't need to see this pose mode, so I'm going to select my graph editor. So I can see a graph, and I have 120 frames that I in my playback range. So let's start to set some keyframes on here. So I'm going to set the keyframes on the ball control. And I can do that in this here. Instead of doing it in the transforms, I can keyframe them in my controls for the ball control. So I'm going to start with my ball up in the air. So we'll go up about 10. Bring this down so I can see it. And I'm going to insert a single keyframe at 1, a keyframe at 20, keyframe at 40, a keyframe at 60, insert single keyframe at 80, 100, and 120. And then we'll go back to frame 10. So I probably should have done the bottom keyframes first, but it doesn't matter because it can be updated. And 30, go back to 0. 50. 70, 90, and 110. Now if I play this back, I'll see the ball moving, but it's moving in a very even manner. So I'm going to approach this bouncing ball animation from a layered animation process. And I want to start by getting my up and downs working accurately. And I know that to do that, I need to change the keys, the in and out tangents of my keyframes in my graph editor. So I'll click drag and select the bottom keyframes. Now I can change the interpolation mode or the handle type. I just want the handle type. I'll choose vector. And now I can go in and also change the height. So there's some decay in my bounce. So over time the ball is going to decay in its bounce, and it'll get lower and lower to the ground. And I think, so let's go let's go to frame 130, and we'll add another 0, and we'll fix the playback range later. So now if I play this back, it looks like it's bouncing a little bit, but it doesn't have an oomph to it. And I can fix that because I know that over time the bottom bounces will get smaller, will get faster, and I can change the hang time so it stays in the air a little bit. So acceleration time, hang time around the top keyframe, and then drop time. And I know that some of these arcs can be adjusted. So let's move And now I want to click on the keyframes and work with the handles to create some sharp bounces, and I'm going to increase some of the hang time by changing the arc shape. Now if I play back, so it does have more of a bounce to it, and I think that these frames can probably go a little faster. So it's decaying over time. It's speeding up as it continues. And clean up these arcs. So now that's the translate in the Z axes. And I can now make this translate along the Y axes, so it bounces over time. So let's go back to the beginning, start keyframe, and location, right click, set single keyframe, go back to the end of the animation, and translate this over time. And now it's added another curve here, so I can see the Y location curve. This curve has an in and out tangent, a smooth in and out. So I'm going to change that interpolation type because I want it to move in an even manner. So interpolation mode, linear. Now if I play back, and I can also now change the rotation of the ball itself. So let's see, this is frame 124. So let's go back to our scene. And we're going to set keyframes on the ball itself. So at frame 1, so this is rotate, we want to rotate in X. So insert keyframe, and then we'll go to frame 124. Insert single keyframe, frame 124. And we're going to change this to -360. And insert single keyframe. Again, we're going to change the interpolation type to linear. And now, as this bounces, I can see it rolling. So we'll go back to the ball control armature, and now we can add the squash and stretch. So let's find our object. So when it hits the ground, that's when it's going to squash and stretch the most. So we'll set a keyframe here, and then we'll go back a couple of keyframes and bring it back to its volume situation. So it's going to come down, and it would stretch a little bit before. So right about in here, let's make it stretch, and then it squashes, and then it's going to come up 1 or 2 frames and retain its volume. So it comes down, it squashes, and then it's back up to its volume. And then right about here, so we'll set a keyframe, and right about there it would stretch a little bit, and when it hits the ground it would squash, keyframe, and go back to its volume. And then the hang time, and then the same thing repeats. So now if I play back, the ball should squash and stretch and bounce. And I can hide the armature, so, and now play back. And I have a bouncing ball. So I'll save this. And to render it out, let's go back and so we've got, we'll do resolution, we'll bring this down to 50%. And in view, we'll do viewport render animation. So to do that, so it's set it as PNG. So in our output settings, we want to give it a location. So it created the entire animation as PNGs. I could look at that if I brought the PNGs into another file, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go find my project And I'm going to call this ball test and change the format to AVI JPEG and say accept. And let's try this again. So let's do view, viewport render animation. And now I can go look and find that AVI file and see a play blast of my animation. So if I click on a repeat, I can play this a couple times and get an idea of how my animation is going to determine what I need to fix, what I need to change, and what I need to fix. So that looks like a rubber ball bouncing. I think maybe the squash and stretch towards the end is a little bit strong. Probably could be pulled back a little bit. But now I have a preview of my animation and I can continue to work on my file.